Hey everybody, this is Ryan with Red Dragon Herbs and Teas. We sent out an email about a week ago and got your addresses. We were going to do the class down at Soulful in Indianola, and the class was going to be called Enrich Your Life with Loose Leaf Herbal Teas. And we sent out this packet that had some tea in it, which is an herbal blend, our house blend of peppermint, chamomile, lemongrass, and spearmint, and also a something of an outline of what we probably would have covered at the class. So hopefully you've had some time to enjoy the tea and maybe look at that outline. But I also said in the email that I would do a quick video for you guys and cover a lot of what we would talk about in the class. So here we are. Now, for those of you that don't know us, I am Ryan Llewellyn, and my wife Mary. We are the owners of Red Dragon Herbs and Teas. We started back in 2015 at the downtown Des Moines Farmers Market, and ever since then we've built up a pretty good business really in the local area. And at this point we have customers nationwide too, so that is kind of cool. We're growing and hope to grow some more, I guess. But we mainly focus on herbal tea blends. And one thing I'll kind of start off with here is just a little bit about some definitions. Now, when you say tea, technically tea refers to a specific plant, the Camellia sinensis plant, which is the plant that you get black tea, green tea, white tea, oolong, yellow tea. It all more or less comes from the same plant. And the beverage that you would get from that plant is what's technically known as tea. So when we make a cup of tea from peppermint, chamomile, you name it, anything other than that plant, technically it's not tea. But now we're not really very big sticklers on this, so we use the phrase tea interchangeably for those things. We could say rooibos tea, peppermint tea, or whatever, and to us it's just the same as black tea, green tea. So some people do get kind of huffy about that. We don't. But I just think it's good if you're going to look at the world of loose leaf herbal tea to know that there is technically that distinction. Now, tea and herbal teas have been used for a very, very long time. Very early in human history, people were making teas, and even in fairly recent history, if you ask your grandmother what she did when she was sick, there's a good chance that she may have made a cup of peppermint tea or chamomile or raspberry leaf tea. So this is something that's been with us as humans for a very, very long time. Now, some of the reasons I like to drink tea, and some of the reasons why I think you should get into it, is that there's a really nice cultural experience that you can have when you get into some of these things. So what I mean by that is, say, to have a cup of yerba mate tea, which is something that is very popular down in like Argentina, Uruguay, those parts of South America. Or maybe Moroccan mint tea, which is green tea with spearmint and peppermint. That it's kind of cool, just like being able to sample, the cuisines from around the world. It is the same with tea, where there's just different little things that come from different parts of the world, and you can broaden your horizons by taking part of those. And we'll talk about some of those specific ones later on into it. And there's also the health benefits of herbal tea. A lot of them are loaded with vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, these kind of things. And it's also nice that with herbal teas, you can self-medicate yourself to an extent. So, if you have certain ailments, say sore throats, upset stomachs, problems going to sleep, just kind of general inflammation, there are herbs for that you can drink, and they will help you feel better. And we'll get into that. That's a very, very broad topic, so we're not going to cover everything. but we will get into it. And I also like herbal teas too because they're very versatile. And what I mean by that is that since most of them are caffeine free, there's a few that aren't, and we'll talk about those. That you can enjoy a nice hot beverage any time of the day. So there's herbs that you can drink in the morning that kind of get you going a little bit, and then there's ones you can have right before bed that help you wind down, or ones that you can just sip on throughout the day. Just to enjoy the sensation of a hot beverage. So to put that into comparison with, say, coffee, and I'm a coffee drinker myself too, so I'm not putting coffee down, but typically I'll have coffee in the morning, and then throughout the day I'll be drinking on herbal tea. Whereas if I want the hot beverage, I don't really want to go for a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or right before bed. Just because obviously, you're going to get the jitters and be up all night, and and that's not good. But, and also kind of on that note of being able to have it any time of day, a nice cup of herbal tea it's enjoyable. It's relaxing to just be able to sit there and say sip on some peppermint, or anything like that, just whatever you prefer. The blend actually that we just sent out to you guys, that one's really nice, I think, just for relaxing, because it does taste so good. Now, when we talk about loose leaf tea, the definition of that is, well, just the loose leaves. It's not put into a bag. And so I guess that's just the distinction right there. A lot of people don't really know that, but some of the reasons why you would want to have a loose leaf tea, for one, you get better ingredients typically. A lot of times, and this is definitely true with real tea from the Camellia sinensis plant, the lower quality tea goes into the bags, whereas the loose leaf is going to be the higher qualities that goes out as loose leaf. So you get better ingredients. You get a wider range of options, really, because if you only drink tea that comes out of the bag, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever's putting the tea in the bag and what they want to put in it. So if you want to make your own blends, or try a certain herb or whatever, usually you're going to have to go loose leaf to kind of get really off the very, very beaten path. And it also makes for a better flavor, typically. Now, usually tea in a bag is going to have technically a stronger flavor, but the flavors are going to be more complex coming out of loose leaf, and that's because that whole leaf and the way it infuses, basically the oils come out a little bit differently, and they keep a little bit better too, so the flavor is a little bit fresher. So, and that's primarily what we're talking about. I'm not disparaging tea from a bag. I would, if my back was up against the wall and someone offered me a cup of tea from a bag, I would be just happy with that. But loose leaf tea, there are benefits to it. Now, a lot of people are intimidated by loose leaf tea. They think it looks difficult, and really the truth is that it's not very complicated at all. It's very simple. You don't even really need a lot of equipment. Basically, what I've got here in my hand is all you really, really need to get started. And I know there are some tea companies that make a pretty good living selling the accessories to make tea. And there's a lot of fancy things. You can make this as fancy as you want. And some of the things that they have are pretty cool. I'm not disparaging those things either. But this is pretty much all you need to get started. Just a simple strainer. Anything that will hold the tea together, but not let it get all through the water. Anything that strains will work, and a mug, anything to heat the water. Um, and there's a lot of ways that you can do loose leaf tea as well too. One of my favorite methods actually is using a French press, like what you would use for coffee. That's kind of nice because you can make a good enough quantity of the tea that if you're planning on sipping on it all afternoon or all morning or whatever, as opposed to just having a cup, that is kind of nice. But some people have been making tea, loose leaf tea, in their Keurigs. I guess there's a special pod thing that you can put in there that you can stuff with your own tea. Now, I've never actually done that, and I'm a little skeptical of it because, we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But to me, it doesn't seem like it should work, but people say it does, so, whatever. But basically, this is how you make a cup of tea. And to just talk about making a cup is you would take 1 teaspoon, roughly, of the herbs, put them in whatever your thing is, bring water up to a boil, 1 teaspoon per 6 to 8 ounces of water. So, obviously a mug like this is a little bit bigger, so you might want to have a little bit more in this thing. And then stick it in once the water is boiled, and let it sit for at least 5 minutes. And if it sits longer than that, that's just fine with herbal teas typically. And while it's sitting there, it's infusing. And what's going on is the hot water is extracting all the oils basically from the leaves and, getting into the water. And that's how you have your aromatic cup of herbal tea. Now, one thing that is kind of important to know is whatever you use to strain your tea, if you use a tea ball like this, it's good to not fill it up more than halfway. And why that is because part of the way to make this work is that the tea needs to soak up the water, and so it's going to expand in there, and the water has to circulate through. And if it expands through there where there's really not a lot of room for the water to circulate, you're going to get a weaker flavor than you could have had with a cup of tea. So that's really basically in a nutshell how to actually make a cup of herbal tea. If you're going to use something bigger, like say you have a teapot with a little strainer in it or something, you just kind of scale it up based on the size. But generally speaking, with herbs, the water temperature needs to be at boiling or, a little below, and needs to sit for at least 5 minutes. Now, compared to real tea, herbal teas are very forgiving. With real tea, it is possible to overbrew tea, especially green teas, white teas, definitely for sure, and oolongs to a lesser extent. But you can't overdo it with regular tea. With herbs, that usually doesn't happen that often. If you can't really oversteep it. If the water temperature is a little off, you're probably going to be just fine. Now, there's a lot of ways to drink herbal tea. Usually we just use a mug like this, just typical coffee mug, whatever, that's fine. But, you could also use some of these. These are reusable tea bags, and there's also disposable ones that you could fill with your own loose leaf tea. And that opens up a lot of things for you too. I like those to-go coffee mugs. A lot of times I've got some tea balls that are basically like this without the handle part, and I'll just throw that in there and take a cup of herbal tea with me wherever I go. Sometimes you can cold brew herbs as well too, and now the flavor is not going to be as strong as if you used the hot water. But say if you take a shaker bottle and put your tea in there, let it sit for an hour, overnight, whatever. It doesn't really matter, just as long as it sits in there for a little while. you can get a decent cup of cold brew herbal tea. That's something to think about, especially during the warmer months, which, well, we just had a pretty good snow today in November, so we're a little ways from those warmer months, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, to store loose leaf tea, that's something that's pretty simple as well too. All you need is something more or less airtight. The pouch that we sent it in, it's pretty good. Just keep it zipped up and put it in a cool, dark cupboard, typically. It's got a pretty good shelf life. Tea doesn't really expire, so to speak. It can stay in there for a long time. But if it's not stored right, after about a year or so, it starts to lose some of its flavor. It kind of gets a little stale. If it sits in your cupboard for a year, you could still drink it. It'll be just fine. It's just maybe not as fresh as it was on day one. But now, one thing I will caution you on, though, if you're going to buy loose leaf tea or herbs in bulk, and by that I mean like somewhere in the neighborhood of like a pound. Sometimes that can be kind of hard to store, and that takes up a lot of space, really. A pound of, like the typical bags that we sell are 2 ounces by weight, and you're going to get about 30 cups, and from one of those, 25 cups, kind of depending on what it is. So if you would get, like, say, a pound at a time, that's kind of hard to go through in a good amount of time. And some herbs are pretty big. Chamomile, for instance, when we buy a pound of that, it comes in a pretty big bag. We've got one tea that takes calendula, basically like marigold petals, and when we get a 1 pound bag of that, it damn near looks like a pillow. It's so big. All right, now some of the herbal teas that we like, that we work with quite a bit. I'll just kind of run down a list of those. Yerba mate. I mentioned that one earlier. That's the one from South America. They drink it a lot in Argentina, Uruguay, parts of southern Brazil, Paraguay. And that's one that it's got a really nice flavor, I think. It's a little on the grassy side, and it usually has kind of a smoky flavor to it, and that's because they dry it with smoke, when they grow it down in Paraguay typically, or southern Brazil. And this is a really cool one. For one, it's loaded with antioxidants. It's really good for you. But it does have caffeine to it, but not really a whole lot. It's almost like green tea. But it releases over a slower period of time, and they don't know why this is. So it's got kind of a invigorating but calming effect at the same time. It is really cool. And we like to mix it with peppermint, lemongrass, and these are all things that they would sometimes add down there in South America as well too. So it's not completely inauthentic, but it is a good one. I am a big fan of yerba mate. Down there, they a lot of times people will carry special gourds with a special straw, and just sipping on it all day. It is kind of neat. I went down there about 10, 12 years ago or something, and it was unique. And seeing like hot water fountains basically like all over, where people can refill their bottles of hot water to keep adding to their mate all day. So it's definitely something that's ubiquitous with that part of the world. A lot of times the soccer players from down there, when they have press conferences, they'll bring their mate with them as kind of like a show of national pride, I guess. There's also rooibos. And that's one that you may have seen before. Sometimes people call it red tea. It's a bush. The name actually means red bush in Afrikaans, which is basically a dialect of Dutch. And it comes from South Africa, and only South Africa. It's got a nice flavor to it. It is caffeine free. I I've had a hard time really describing the flavor, but the best I think I can do is that it's slightly fruity, but without the sweetness, and maybe a little bit earthy. When it brews up, it's a nice kind of like coppery red color to it. We've got some blends with it where we add ginger and some kind of like citrusy flavors to it, and it is really good. And that's another one that's kind of ubiquitous with another part of the world, South America. Yeah, just a lot. That's what everybody drinks down there. It is kind of popular in Europe, and not quite as popular here. But I think it should be. I really like rooibos. That was one of my early introductions to herbal teas. There's chamomile. Most of you guys are probably familiar with that one. That's a pretty common herbal tea. It's basically a little flower, and the taste of it is kind of apple-like, actually, and which is interesting because in Spanish the name for chamomile is manzanilla, which would basically mean like kind of like little apple. And actually the name chamomile comes kind of really digging in there now, but it comes from Greek, and it basically means like apple of the ground. So these people know what they're talking about. The flavor of chamomile is kind of appley and a little buttery, I think, as well too. You can kind of almost taste like a little kind of smooth butter flavor to it. But chamomile is used a lot for relaxation. A lot of times people like to have it at night before they go to bed because it helps them sleep. It is a very good sedative. So a lot of our caffeine-free blends that are designed for nighttime drinking, specifically for nighttime drinking and relaxation, soothing the stomach and so forth, have chamomile in it because it is a very good herb for herbal tea. And then there's the mints, and mints are kind of the king of the herbal tea world, I think. There's kind of a common phrase, I guess, that if you ask an herbalist like what the one herb that they would take with them if they could only pick one, they always say garlic. Well, for me, I would say peppermint. I really love this herb. And also in the mint family, there's spearmint, of course. Lemon balm technically is in the mint family. And catnip as well, too, actually. Catnip is one that we use. It's a very good sedative. It's really good to put you to sleep. And it has kind of a unique flavor. You can taste the mint to it, but kind of like rooibos. It's got a little je ne sais quoi, I guess, to it that's hard to put your finger on, where it's maybe a little earthy, maybe a little fruity as well too. But catnip is definitely in the mint family, and one that we like. Spearmint is not quite as strong as peppermint. Peppermint has that very strong mint flavor to it, but peppermint and various other mints are in the majority of our teas, and there's good reasons why. The flavor is great, and it's also something that's kind of invigorating, but at the same time relaxing. And it's good for upset stomachs, improving your concentration. Just really, peppermint does all kinds of things, and it's just perfect for herbal tea. There's hibiscus. That's another pretty common one. I think a lot of people in Mexico actually like to drink hibiscus tea. If you've ever been to a Mexican restaurant and seen the old I forgot what they actually call them, but they're the beverage dispensers where they've got like a tank, and there'd be like a little fountain, I guess, inside there where they're blowing the beverage around, so it looks kind of cool, like a little fountain inside there. One of them is usually horchata, which is like a rice, spiced rice drink. But there's usually a red one too, which would be a kind of hibiscus drink. Um, it's a tropical flower, and it has a nice kind of fruity and floral flavor, I guess, as you can imagine. But that's one that is very good for herbal tea, hibiscus. So we do use that a lot. Um, lemongrass. Lemongrass is one that we work with quite a bit. It's in a lot of our blends. Um, it grows as a perennial plant in places like Thailand, Vietnam. It shows up a lot in their cooking as well there too. But it's a plant, as you can imagine. It's a grass. It actually gets very big down there, and it has a chemical in it that is very, very, very similar to uh, what you would find in a lemon, um, where it has that flavor. It's like cit. I don't want it. It's not cit. It's not citronella. It's something kind of like that, but just chemically, it is very similar to citrus fruits, I guess, insofar as the flavor. And the flavor, it is very citrusy. It's a little distinct from citrus, but like for me, I can always taste the difference between someone using lemon or lemongrass, and most people probably could too. But it's one that lends itself very nicely to herbal teas. I really think lemongrass is a good one. It definitely has a lot of minerals to it, so it is good for you that way. But more than anything, I think it just tastes really good. There's raspberry leaf and blackberry leaf. Those are two other common ones in herbal blends. Um, there is a difference between the two insofar as taste, but they both actually have a taste that's actually kind of similar to black tea, and they can be fermented like black tea is, or oxidized. I guess oxidized. That's the word I was looking for. And actually, what's kind of interesting is during World War II in the United Kingdom, where of course they drink a lot of tea. Tea was rationed during the war to 2 ounces a week, which like I said, might make like 20-25 cups of tea, maybe a little pot of tea every morning. So, in other words, it wasn't quite enough for what they would typically want. So, they would use raspberry leaf and blackberry leaf a lot as a way to kind of stretch their tea, and also kind of fill in the gaps on their tea drinking. So, they might drink all their tea in the morning, and then throughout the afternoon drink the raspberry leaf instead of having like an afternoon cup of tea. And if you've ever read the book 1984 by George Orwell, he talks about victory tea in there, and describes how that's like what the poor people, the proles in the book, what they would drink, and that was actually blackberry leaf. So there was some real precedent for that too, just because that book was written right after World War II. So that must have been fresh on his mind actually. But raspberry and blackberry leaf, there are a lot of health benefits to that too. You get a lot of vitamins and minerals, and they're just nice caffeine-free herbs to drink. There's also spices too, like ginger. That's one we work with quite a bit. Usually, I think it has a nice flavor. That's something that's really grown on me over the years. I remember not really liking ginger much, but really coming to appreciate it. The health benefits of that, it's really good for inflammation, reducing that. It's really good for upset stomach. And also there's turmeric too, which isn't quite as spicy as ginger. In fact, it's kind of has like a bit of a earthy flavor to it, but has a lot of the same health benefits, where it's good for inflammation and upset stomach. So these are good ones to incorporate into your daily life. These spices, they kind of help with everything. Cinnamon as well too. That's another kind of common spice. That's good for boosting your circulation. There are definitely health benefits to ginger, but yeah, there's all kinds of things. Really, there's just a whole big world of things that you can use for herbal tea and things that people do use. So you can kind of experiment a little bit with these things too. So now I've kind of touched on this a little bit, is the idea of self-medication. And like I was saying that, it's a really broad topic. It would be one that would deserve its own focus. And there definitely are books that you can read about this kind of thing. But generally speaking, with herbs and loose leaf herbal tea, you can use it for helping with day-to-day ailments. So, you have a little bit of a hangover or something per se. There are herbs that are they're good for that, peppermint and ginger. For one, if you have a little bit of a headache, there are things like, peppermint, lemon balm, valerian, lavender. These kind of things can help deal with symptoms of these problems. Upset stomach, like I've talked about, peppermint, chamomile, ginger, lemon balm is really good for this kind of thing too. If you have problems sleeping at night, chamomile, valerian, catnip, lavender, these are all herbs that are relaxing and can help you kind of wind down. So what I would recommend is getting a good herbal encyclopedia. There are a lot of them out there, but this is one way I've actually learned a lot about this kind of thing, where I would just keep a book. I got like a big coffee table book on herbs, and I would sit on the coffee table and just pick it up and start thumbing through and reading these things. You'll start to learn some of the different folklore for herbs and how they are used and how people around the world use them. It is really quite interesting. It's a really, really big world out there that you can really dig into this. Now, one thing that I think is also kind of cool about loose leaf herbal tea is a lot of these things you can grow in your own backyard. And it even lends itself well to container gardening. You can grow peppermint, spearmint, chamomile is pretty easy to grow. You can grow lemongrass. Typically, you can find that in most of the nurseries. Usually sell it. It grows as an annual here. It doesn't grow as a perennial, but you'll if you plant one, you'll get all the lemongrass you need. A lot of basils actually make good loose leaf tea, like lemon basil and orange basil, so forth. You can grow catnip. Bee balm actually makes a really, really good tea that almost has a Earl Grey like flavor to it. It is really nice. Lavender, you can grow that. It looks pretty too. It's a little hard to pick all the flowers for tea, but like I said, it's a plant that looks nice, and you can get something productive out of it as well too. If you grow raspberries or blackberries in your yard too, or even if you're out walking on a nature trail, and see raspberries, blackberries, you can not only pick the berries, but pick a few of the leaves and make tea out of that. Like I said, it's a big world, and there's a lot of just different things like that you can try. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's not quite the same as being able to be face to face with each other and interacting off each other, answering questions and so forth. But I'm glad we at least got to do something. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to email us, reddragonherbsandteas@gmail.com. And I want to thank you for signing up for the class. And I hope this kind of makes up for the fact that we did have to cancel it. So again, this has been Ryan with Red Dragon Herbs and Teas. Thanks for watching.